In this video, we will go over how to create a column in the gradebook. Now, keep in mind, before you create a column, these columns are not attached to anything you create in your course site, such as an assignment or test. If you create something like an assignment, a test, or a discussion that you want to have graded in somewhere like a weekly area, those will automatically get a column in the gradebook like these have. These types of columns would just be for something students aren't necessarily submitting online and you just want to put a grade in. A good example of this would be attendance or participation. It's not necessarily something tangible students have handed in online, it's just something you want to put a grade in for. This could also work for something they handed in class that you just want to put in a grade for. To do this, click the Create Column button and then give your column a name. After you give your column a name, scroll down and consider the primary display. By default, it will set to score, which will show the grade as a number out of whatever points possible you set this assignment to. So, if I set this assignment to 100 points possible, that means I'm grading the students out of 100 points, so I'd put in a grade like 95. When primary display is set to score, that will mean it shows up as 95 out of 100. If you choose letter, it will convert the number out of the points possible into a letter grade. So a 100 would show up as an A+, whereas a 95 would show up as an A. The text option would be used if you didn't want to put any number in and you just wanted to type in a value. So some people might use a grade column with a text primary display to put in something like the word submitted. So instead of entering an actual grade, this might just be something they did or didn't do, so you'd set it to text, and instead of having to enter a number, it would just allow you to type in some text and hit enter. Percentage will show the grade as a percent. So, if the points possible here were 50, and you entered a grade in as 50 out of 50, the student would see 100%. The complete incomplete option is a black or white setting. No matter what you set your points possible to, it will show the student's grade as a green check mark as long as you enter in some value, even if it's a 0. So complete incomplete is typically just used with 1 points possible. You can go in and type in a 1 or a 0, and on the student's end, they will see a check mark. If you want the student to have an incomplete, you would just leave the column blank and not put in a grade. The secondary display gives you the same options. The secondary display will show up in the grade center to the right of the grade that you give the student. So if you have a primary display of score and you set the secondary display to percentage, in the grade center you'll see 95 out of 100, but then in parentheses you'll see a 95% if the points possible were 100. Categories are useful if you're calculating your final grade in the grade center. The system provides some pre-generated categories to pick from, so you can choose them, or if this is not part of a grouping, like quizzes or homeworks, you can just leave it on no category. If you're familiar with the Rubrics tool, you're able to add or attach a rubric here that you can grade student submissions with when you're doing the grading. If there's a due date associated with this grade, you could type that in here. Here at the bottom of the screen under Options, you can choose whether you want this column to be usable in Grade Center calculations. That means, is it allowed to be used in the math columns if you want to calculate something like a final grade? There's also a toggle to whether or not you want to show this column to students. And then the last option is whether or not you'd like to show the statistics to students on their end. If set to yes, it would allow students to see the average grade of the class and the median grade next to their own. Once you've created your column, click Submit, and it will show up in the full grade center. Once the column is there, you can just click on the double dashes to enter in the grades. As you can see, I had score as my primary display, which shows the 95.00, but I had secondary display set to percentage, which shows the 95%. Only you see the secondary display in the full grade center. On students' end, they will only see the primary display of 95.00 out of 100.